Welcome everybody to this World Satsanga held on the 22nd of February 2023 in conjunction with Kevin Moore and The Moore Show. And I encourage you as usual to go and visit his YouTube site, The Kevin Moore Show, to see what additional pieces of excellent detective work Kevin is doing to understand more about the greater reality. So this particular lecture is about the experiences we're going to have as we approach the dawn of the Aquarian Age. For those of you who are into horoscopes and other astrology, we're moving away from the Piscean Age, which is technical or technology, and we're moving into the more, shall we say, state of beingness side or less structured side of the Aquarian Age. What we're experiencing now around the world is actually a symptom of the change. We're moving into the cusp of the two ages. These are ages where we predominantly work in one particular way as a function of the galaxy rotating and moving through different, shall we say, areas of locally high and locally low frequencies. The low frequencies are to do with us becoming more and more structured or more selfish or more organized, so to speak. Whereas the Aquarian Age is to do with us being more considerate and calm and spiritual and in a state of beingness. So when we're moving from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius, we will be really in an area of confusion. And you can see this by the way that some of our governments have been working with us in terms of how the leadership is, the confusion around the leadership, the confusion around how they respond to being in a position of extreme authority and extreme responsibility. But also you can see that we're starting to move away from the desire to basically try to control something or finish something. And that's been quite obvious in the way that the collective United Nations have worked with Ukraine to help solve the problem with Russia. We could have easily have gone into a World War III, but there's been a lot of mature thinking in terms of how we can support the Ukrainians whilst actually not being directly involved. And clearly everybody's been indirectly involved in terms of supplying different sorts of armaments to them. But the idea of trying to create a level of support, but not direct support, is a mature way of not allowing it to escalate. So we're starting to understand that we need to be more mature in our thought processes and more considerate for those around us, not just those locally around us, such as our neighbors or our friends or relatives, but in terms of those neighboring countries, because we're all human beings and we're all wanting to exist on the earth. But if we try to finish something in a rather mechanical way or a very abrupt way, such as with extreme force, then it only turns sour and ends up being a bigger problem to solve than that problem we were trying to solve. So there'll be an element of confusion surrounding people. Certainly people have a spiritual thought process and a spiritual way of life, because there'll be a feeling of, well, what's next? There'll be a feeling of finish or coming towards an end, but there's no sight of the future. And that's because the difference between the Piscean Age and the Aquarian Age is quite marked. You know, if we go from a very sort of structured way of being or a very sort of self-centered way of being, and we're going towards a more amorphous way of being, or just a state of beingness itself, and acceptance and being of service and being more mature in our thought processes and considering how our actions affect the rest of the population, not just those directly around us, but those downstream of those around us, then you can see that it is quite a different thing. That doesn't mean we're going to move away from using technology. It means that we're going to use it in a more mature way. and the need to progress from a technological perspective isn't going to be there so much. So you'll find that there won't be so many massive technological leaps as we've experienced in certainly the last 100 years. But there will be changes in how we use technology. We'll potentially move away from the electronic way of doing things and moving into a more organic way of doing things, still getting the same responses, or perhaps even better responses, by using what's there in nature rather than having to create or recreate nature. So if I look at it from a personal perspective, not just my perspective, but how people are going to experience this shift, there's definitely going to be a case that we've experienced around the world where people are, if you like, being random. There's nothing to back up what they're saying, specifically if they're in positions of authority. So those people will start to become ousted and replaced with people who are actually responsible and have a considered approach. So there's going to be this, as I said before, this time of confusion, this time of randomness, this time of what's next, this time of I've finished, but I don't understand what I finished or why I finished it. And so when we experience the transition, which is going to be over several years, it could happen quite quickly, or it could happen over tens of years or hundreds of years. Depends upon us as to how we accept this transition. We might go through what's classified as being a little bit of a dark age, or an age of confusion, or an age of chaos, where there is no clear direction, because those who are in authority don't have a clear direction for us to move into, because they don't understand, and those who are taking the direction from those leaders don't understand as well what the direction is supposed to be. So the feeling of not being connected to people, the feeling of not having a role to play, the feeling of being unable to make a decision, the feeling of wanting everything and nothing, the feeling of simply not feeling that you're in the right place at the right time is going to be quite prevalent with everybody, and certainly those individuals who are spiritual, because there may be a complete change in direction in terms of your thought processes, how you work with people, how you heal people, how you coach or counsel people, how you interact normally with your family members, and how you interact normally with those individuals you have to interact with for your normal work, if you have to work as well. And so you might feel that if you've got a level of intelligence where you're able to analyze what's going on, you may see people starting to lose their ability to be competent in what they're doing, because they're in a state of confusion. There'll be a feeling of transition, and they don't understand what that transition is. They feel it, but they don't know it. And as such, there may continue to be an element of incompetence in and around us. It might even include ourselves as well, in terms of our inability to be able to navigate our way through certain decision processes, or understanding what we have to do to fulfill a certain level of responsibility or job role. So the best thing to do is to not walk away from responsibility, but moreover observe how we're thinking, behaving, and acting, and give ourselves more time to make decisions. Go with what your heart tells you and not what logic tells you. Recognize that there is going to be, for the foreseeable future, maybe increasing levels of confusion or randomness or inappropriate thought processes and behaviors, not only from our leaderships, but from ourselves as well. But as long as you can use the observer self and recognize that this is happening within you, then you can move yourself away from it and do your best to continue in your spiritual role, but it'll become more unstructured rather than structured. It'll be more amorphous rather than solid. It'll be more broadband rather than narrowband. So this, in sort of summary, is what we're going to experience as a function of the change from the age of Pisces to the Aquarian age. And that's also going to affect us in a physical way as well. Certainly, we're going to get more weather changes. Certainly, we're going to potentially get more viruses. Certainly, we're going to decide collectively that in a natural way, we're going to start to reduce the population of the Earth so that we can educate all people on the Earth, not just those who are in a supposed first world country, but everybody's going to be treated equally. And that's part of the function of moving from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius, where we start to become more considerate, more service orientated, more caring, more concerning, and certainly more communal in terms of how we think, behave, and act. We're going to be more mature. But there's going to be a little bit of confusion between now and then. Well, I hope that gives you some idea of what's happening now, and also an idea of why it's happening as well, and where we're going. And that'll itself give you something to, well, to think about and to work with, and to help accelerate the change between Pisces and Aquarian ages. So welcome everybody to this questions and answers Satsanga for February, which I'm very pleased for you all to participate in. And I've got two sets of questions here from Faith and Ola, because they can't make it today. So I'll put them first, and hopefully it will. Oh, yeah, it looks like everybody else is below. Great. So Faith's question is: can we change an event by changing our thought processes and reprogramming by utilizing psycho-spiritual methods? This means, say, my car malfunctions, and now my thought is that we have to fix the car because it's broken or about to break. Can I go to higher frequencies and reprogram my thoughts so my car is working fine, etc., and see that change, and therefore the car is functioning properly? The answer to that is yes, and I know from past transformation conferences we had with Dolores all those years ago, and with Nancy and Julia, that there has been people who've totally focused on changing their reality, and that reality was in fact changed. It was basically, it was something as bizarre as winning the lottery, and they saw themselves every day as winning the lottery, and they did, and it was a significant amount. So it can work. The thing is, we are in a particular event space, and there's lots of different fractal versions of ourselves in different event spaces. So one is where the car doesn't break down. One is where we've maintained it properly. One is where we've got a different car, for example, because we have to make different changes in how we interact with things, and therefore different event spaces or different realities get created. So based upon that is possible, but it might well be that we've got to function or focus on this particular event space or reality, so to speak, for us to experience, learn, and evolve in the way we're supposed to, or this particular version of ourselves is supposed to. Good. Okay, Ella's question next. What is the capped limit on the number of backfilled souls that are allowed to incarnate? If we currently have 58%, now that means 4.6 billion backfilled souls are already here. Does that mean that 58% of human souls have to have ascended? Yes, basically, they have ascended. And won't be coming back to Earth be difficult, or won't it be a different Earth? If so, they've evolved pretty fast, right? Or do human souls with karma have to come back to a sea of backfilled people? If we've got karma, then we need to come back to ratify that karma, or sever the karma, or master the karma. So it is quite likely that we will be coming back to a sea of individuals who've got different quality of soul, and therefore a different level of experience here, and therefore a different evolutionary level. And there's a soul that's in between the human soul quality or the sentience associated with it and the animal soul or quality of sentience associated with it, and they're being allowed to incarnate. And in most cases, that they're only being allowed one incarnation, and in most cases, of course, they haven't incarnated before, therefore. So they're struggling with the individualized free will. So it is possible for us to have to come back and be surrounded by
quite a large number of individuals who are not the same soul quality. And it's quite easy to see there could be quite a dystopian future associated with that. Now, my understanding is that there is a cap, and the cap is that there can be no more than 70% backfill compared to a 30% level of higher quality souls. So, and don't forget the souls include animal souls and plant souls and mineral souls and all those different things, or sentient, so to speak. So we have to think of it in those sort of ways. Okay. So it's yeah, it's possible we could come back to quite a dystopian future, but those souls also have got will evolve, but they won't get the chance to evolve back on Earth again. But we have to, if we've got karma, we need to come back here to master it. Although we can stay in the energetic and master it, but it takes a lot longer than being here to do it. Okay. Okay, Andy's just given me a question. The notion of emptiness called sunyata is central to Buddhist cosmology, and it's multiple meanings depending upon the context. Are you discovering now, while writing your newest book, that emptiness or nothingness plays a larger role than previously thought? Basically, in the book I'm writing now, structural space where we exist now, and that which is basically the structure of the origin, is a infinitesimally minute aspect of the greater space, which is what I'm told to call substructural space or nothingness. So yes, it plays a significant part. And when I eventually publish, or hopefully get the book called Beyond the Origin published, we'll start to see that structural space is, although it's massive in reality from our perspective, when you look at it in comparison to nothingness or substructural space, it's not even a grain of sand in all the beaches and all the planets in all the universes in the multiverse. So it's a significant thing basically. But I'm not sure that the Buddhists' cosmology consider things that far. They might do, but I'm not sure whether they go beyond the multiversal environment. But certainly, substructural space is nothingness, and is infinitesimally large in comparison to the infinitesimally small structure of structural space. Okay. Next one's from Eliza. You've said previously that we go all the way to so I'll start again. You've said previously that we have to go all the way down to the bottom to access the top. I have taken that to mean that as humans in this low dimension and frequency can connect directly with source. Is that what we mean? And if so, how is our ability to connect with different entities from higher frequency dimensions? Basically, where we are now is in a low frequency environment, and we're here because it is a difficult environment to exist within, and it's an evolutionary accelerant as well. But we can connect with source whilst we're here. That means our sentience can connect. It doesn't mean our sentience is there. It means our sentience connects. So increasing our frequencies, we can connect with source by using some of the techniques I've taught, which is traversing the frequencies, or you can use other things like just simply, focusing on meditating. We can do Kriya Yoga as well, which was taught by Paramahansa Yogananda, and before him his guru, which was Sri Yukteswar, and Lahiri Mahashaya before him, and Babaji before him. So the techniques are there. Some of them are faster than others, but we can connect with source, and do connect with source if you wanted to, by going up to the highest frequencies within the multiversal environment. In fact, once you get over the 100th frequency, connecting with source is definitely possible. Okay, along with other entities there as well, in above the 12th frequency, and it can connect with other entities that are incarnate or disincarnate in the frequencies associated with the physical universe upwards. So it's just a matter of where you focus your sentience, actually. Next one from AW. I remember you telling us that once we are in a higher frequency, most people can't see us. What I'm experiencing is quite different. For example, I can see lots of people in the shop, yet the moment I go into an aisle towards the crowd, there's literally 1 or 2 persons max. The rest of them kind of disappear. Same thing at the checkout. When I look from a distance, there's a queue, but after approaching the self-service checkout, there's usually nobody or one person in front of me. I also noticed a similar thing on the road whilst driving. There's barely any traffic when I'm driving my car. I live in London, so this lack of people is definitely unusual. Can I explain, please? It's quite likely you're touching on seeing those individuals who are a higher frequency. And therefore, when you start to question it, you start to doubt. And that's ego, basically. And that brings you down the frequency, so they disappear. A long time ago, well, not so long, but certainly 5 or 6 years ago, I explained the process that you're sort of explaining to Julia Cannon, and she said, "Oh, I think I've experienced this, but the other way around, similar to you." And I explained it. She was driving on the freeway, and she saw this black SUV pulling onto the freeway, moving behind her, with a view to, as she would have expected, it to accelerate and pass her, to overtake her. It didn't. So she looked around everywhere, and it had gone, totally gone. So she said, maybe I saw that person, and that person was a high frequency individual. So what I'm seeing here is that you're touching on observing individuals who've moved up the frequencies, who have ascended a frequency. One of those 58 individuals who've ascended, and therefore being backfilled by the backfill people. But it seems that you're picking up people and observing people who've got moved up the frequencies. And when you start to question it, that's when you drop down the frequencies, and just a little bit enough, but it's enough to be able to not see them anymore. Okay. And so from Julia, when we think about parallel universes, we experience what we choose. Well, what about the factors which affect us of experiencing other people's choice? Well, for instance, choice A or choice B. Do we experience these A or B by accident, or is it decided by other factors? What are those factors? Also, what about when we are not aware of those A and B chosen by others? Does being aware also factor? We interact with our own event space, which we create, and therefore we duplicate or triplicate ourselves, as the case may be, depending upon the choices we have. When we move into one of those event spaces, we focus on the one we've chosen to go into, but the other choices, part of us, or a duplication happens where we go down those. If one of those event spaces, including the one we focus on, happens to coincide with a potential to interact with somebody else's event space, then we start to become part of that as well. Now, it might not affect us in any way, but it might just, shall we say, back up their event space, and their event space would back up our event space. And then if you think about that and then start to duplicate it, with all these event spaces started to interact with each other because they sort of back up each other, then you start to see how a larger event space can start to be created. Not just a very localized one, but a larger one, which could end up being like suburb sized, or city sized, or country sized, or planet sized, or solar system sized, or galaxy sized, or even universe sized. So we do affect each other's event spaces, but more often than not, we tend to, without even knowing it, create a construct which backs up the justification for their event space, because part of our event space agrees with it, so to speak. That's the way to think about it. Daniel, well, looks like 2 or 3 here. 2. What are some of the ways to express recognition of our consciousness and our existence, and express appreciation, gratefulness, and our gratitude for our opportunity of having existence? Basically, just consider that, in essence, being incarnate here with individualized free will is a very rare opportunity. Some of us have to wait a long time. If we have what I call back-to-back incarnations, it's usually because we've agreed to have an experience or participate in something that is beyond the longevity of a particular human body. So we would say have 5, 6, 7, even 10 lives that are back to back, where we go straight from one incarnation to the next, and we end up being, for example, a doctor in each of them, because we're experiencing different things, and maybe we want to experience the progression in medical science, for example, or maybe follow some sort of research, for example. So we do have to think about the fact that, the chances of us being here are quite rare. The fact we've been in several thousand lives before is sort of a justification for us being here again, because we've been successful, we've experienced something, we've evolved from it as a function of the learning from that experience. So I think it's being grateful, and therefore recognizing others as being souls as well, also struggling to navigate through their incarnation, and therefore being of service when appropriate is the way forwards to basically give gratitude and gratefulness. Helping people when it's necessary, when we can, but not overloading them or putting ourselves on them, for example. Okay. Second question from Daniel. When we express gratitude for this opportunity of existence, does it make a difference? Is it recognized, and is it helpful for others? It does make a difference. It makes a difference to our own evolution, makes a difference to our frequencies. We rise up the frequencies, and those frequencies affect others positively. And also we tend to give an example of how to live, how to be. And so individuals observe that and sometimes consciously copy it, which is good. Sometimes subconsciously copy it, which is also good. So being a good example is also perfect way of expressing gratitude. Thank you. Jagjot, you've got a couple of questions here for us. Good. In Hindu mythology, the dead human body is burned because it's believed that the incarnate entity otherwise would not leave the body or stop identifying with the body. In other methods, the dead body is buried in the ground. Could you explain if there's any relevance to how the body is disposed of? Really, it doesn't matter. I mean, the Tibetans used to break the body up and leave it for the animals to feed on. My feeling is that there should be enough time for the soul to leave the body, and it's usually around 3 days. It might be a bit more, I can't remember now. But some souls leave faster, specifically if they're gurus or yogis and they mastered their body. Others take a long time. In general, if the body is disposed of before the soul has left properly, it doesn't really affect the soul in terms of them wanting to stay here. If they've been particularly attracted or addicted to being here, they'll still be here, irrespective of how the body's disposed of. And the body doesn't matter, of course. It's something that we just use. It's like a hire car while we're here. So really, it doesn't matter whether it's buried, burned. Obviously, burying is slightly better because the body's there for a bit longer, so the soul can get out whilst it's still there. If it's dissolved in acid, for example, doesn't matter. If it's broken up so the animals can have it, it doesn't really matter. If it's used for science, it doesn't matter. Okay. Second part: is fire an entity itself? Because its place is important. It's got an important place in all Hindu mythology and sacrificial offerings. Fire will represent two things. One is it's an essential element, one of the four main elements that are recognized as being powerful in all mythology and science. And two, it's a purification. So it's a purification method as well. So from that perspective, it would be seen as being very important, specifically in eras of, shall we say, low civilization, low technology, and the potential for having low medical technology as well. So, a dead body could bring diseases, could start to rot and create disease. So burning it is the obvious way to stop the disease, basically, and virus. So my feeling is that's why it's there. It's to stop any diseases from proliferating as a function of the body just being allowed to rot in the open. But fire itself isn't an entity. It's just a way in which energy is being used. In effect, it's allowing energy to transform from one thing to another, from basically a low frequency, to a higher frequency, and the heat and the ability to burn other things or consume other things is also part of that. Third question: what is the difference between self-aware sentience and self-realization? It's basically the same thing. Self-aware sentience and self-realization is the same thing. It's us knowing what we are, not just believing it or saying it, but actually experientially knowing what we are, connecting totally with Source or God, connecting totally with our higher self or our Godhead, being able to connect and communicate with other entities, and absolutely know that we're not the human body. That's self-realization. That's self-awareness. That's recognizing our sentience. So it's the same thing. Okay, question 4 from Jagjot. In Hindu practices, sometimes a priest will read a mantra and blow some air out of his mouth towards the disease to fix his or her problems. He's blowing air, sometimes some kind of technique, or is it just a point of focus? We're in a physical world. And unfortunately, there are things that some people don't recognize as working unless there's some physical interaction of some sort. So doing something which creates a physical focus or a datum for the person receiving the healing, or the person's healing themselves, is a way of giving them the authority to receive the healing, or recognizing that healing is being received. So basically, it is a point of focus. It's a point of physical focus. It's a bit like using tarot cards, or crystals, or anything physical. It's a way of focusing on higher frequencies, but using a physical interface to do it. It's the same thing. 5th question. If you reach a certain level of sentience, then does reading mantras become irrelevant? Are mantras some kind of focus? Mantras are a way of stopping us having a mind chatter, effectively, like praying would be. But praying is not as powerful as a mantra. So a mantra is repeating the same thing. It's like physically focusing your eyes on something, like the point of the origin of the spiritual third eye, with your eyes closed, or yogis do it without their eyes closed. So it's in effect a focus, and it's quite a powerful focus, because if you say, I'm one with the source is one with me, I am the source, or just simply continue to say either in your mentally spoken words or physically spoken words, that creates a focus. You're focusing on that, and not, I forgot to do the shopping today. I've got to go and make sure the car goes in for a service. Those sorts of things. It stops the mind chatter, the monkey mind chatter. Next question, number 6. Does keeping the back or spine straight or curved affect the way Kundalini energy moves up and down it? Does it block it? Does it also affect the chakras? Keeping the back straight and the neck straight does affect the efficiency in which the energy moves up and down the spine, specifically if you're using Hong Saw or Kriya Yoga based pranayama techniques. It does. It makes a massive difference, actually. So does isolating yourself from the floor by using a woolen rug of some sort, and so does facing the right way, facing east, because east is where the energies of the sun rise over the horizon. So that's worthwhile watching. Okay, does it block it? No, it doesn't block it, and it affects the chakras. It helps to energize the chakras. It actually allows the connection between the chakras and the different energy templates to be more vibrant as well. Okay, well, from Daniel again, this is the 3rd question. It seems there are not many souls who are curious about life and existence and the source of our existence. Is this true? How can we help wake up these people? These are individuals who are backfill people usually, or who have elected to have a really immersed incarnation and therefore experience total immersion. All you can do is lead by example, and if they take on board that example, that's fine. If they don't, then let them carry on, basically. People will wake up in their own way, and they evolve in their own way, and it's best to understand that. And 4, are we making progress individually and as a group? Yeah, if you weren't making progress, you wouldn't be here. Simple. You wouldn't be logged into this meeting right now. So yes, you are making progress. Specifically, as we are still having a problem with low frequencies on the earth, although we are bottoming out. Okay, Patrick, because a quick question. I have a 2-part question about the steps you present in relation to the development of sentience. As far as I can tell, none of the steps that you outlined describe the point at which the philosophers call phenomenal consciousness, aka raw subjectivity, or the capacity to experience arises. Oh yeah, it's in there. The capacity to experience is part of creativity. Top end of intelligence. There's obviously differences in nomenclature between certain individuals, and so phenomenal consciousness or raw subjectivity or the capacity to experience, that's when we start to be creative. That's part of the road to sentience. Okay. Okay, carrying on, in the description you present of the development of sentience, we start out with energy, and from that we ultimately get sentience. So are we then to assume that reality is fundamentally dualistic in nature, i.e. that it consists of two distinct ontological categories, namely energy stuff that lacks any mental or experiential properties, and mind stuff, which is mental experiential properties? Or would I be correct in suspecting that what we are calling energy is actually a pattern of excitation within a fundamental substrate of fundamental awareness? Energy is in effect a component of structural space, which is an aberration in non-structural space. And it has the capacity to create the possibility of sentience becoming a part of its development, hence the road to sentience. However, sentience can also be created by the individualization of sentience from a higher volume of sentience, which is what we are. Our higher selves are. Our higher selves are the individualization of sentience, or the separation of sentience from one higher volume of sentience to make a smaller volume of sentience, to experience other levels of detail that can't be experienced by the higher volume of sentience. So energy is part of structured space, and structured space exists in a vast sea of non-structural space. I hope that explains it. One more question. I also have a question about meditation. In the History of God, page 43, Byron cautions you about not focusing on just being as a means to an end, and making it formal, but on the same page, Source Sensitive tells you that just being is a key part of getting in contact with your core essence. It seems to me that getting in contact with your core essence, i.e. the true self, is the main goal of meditation. If it is true, how do I avoid just being? Just being, in essence, creates oneness, but a level of oneness that is, shall I say, communion, full communion. So that's one way of experiencing connectivity, is full communion or just beingness. What Byron was talking about was me not just being in the just being state of consciousness, because I'm asking questions. So I can't ask questions and be in a state of just beingness, because that's a bliss state. If you like, the just being state is a higher level of experience than me just projecting my consciousness into the multiversal environment. So I'm having to maintain my individuality to be able to understand that I need to get different levels of information from different entities, which included the source and the origin. If I went into a state of just beingness, I would be one with them totally, and therefore lose individuality. That's what it is. Okay. Next one from Vanny. How would we know if we are increasing our frequency? Basically, you tend to hear tinnitus. You tend to get tingling in your hands or your body. You tend to get pressure around the spiritual third eye area. You don't eat as much. Your body feels lighter. You feel more energized. You start to become detached from the emotional aspects of how we interact with individuals. Certainly those who might press our buttons. So that's when you know you're rising up the frequencies, basically. And you tend to start to use your intuition more rather than logic. That's a major one. Okay. Daniel, question 5. How is love different in the physical from the spiritual? You can't use the word love, basically. It just doesn't exist. It's like a total communion, a total oneness. But if you maintain individuality of some sort, then it's like being totally connected. It's being omnipresent within the omniscient, and that's it. There's no comparison between human love and spiritual love that's born from connectivity or communion. 6. When will the new book be in print? The Yom. Briefly, what are the next 3 books you have to plan to release? Right, the Yom book is being in print, I'm told, at the end of this month. So you'll start to see it on Amazon by the end of this month. We've got 10 minutes left. So I'm going to be careful now. If I don't finish the questions, by the way, I'll tag them onto the end outside of this meeting. So don't worry. We'll try to answer your questions. The next book I'm working on now called Beyond the Origin, which is taking us beyond what we understand now about the origin and further. And then there's one book about antichrists, what their role is and how it affects us and how it helps us to become more of service to each other, this way to say. And the other one is about understanding really where all the different religions link in together, where the origin point was, and how that may link into my understanding as well. So that's those. But there's also 3 books that are submitted right now that Ulla's worked on transcribing with me for the World Satsanga, for the first 10 years of the World Satsanga. So the questions and answers and the lectures. And we've got a 4th World Satsanga book, which is being worked on as we speak. i.e., this is part of it. Okay. 7. Are the spiritual beings and guidance who watch over us here on this planet pleased by their work? Is there anything more we can do, or is there anything we are missing that we are not doing to improve the situation? Right now, they're a bit worried we're going down the same route that we've always gone down, but they also understand there's lots of us who are, for want of a better word, working on helping and doing better. So on one side, there's a level of being pleased or joyful. On the other side, there's a level of, well, let's see what happens, because they've been down this route before several times, and it's always ended up being with a reboot. So I think there's a level of concern there. Eliza, what I was trying to ask earlier is, what is it like for our entities in higher frequencies, e.g. frequency 100 plus, to connect with source versus our experience? It's from our perspective, we can't connect with source in the same way. So it's like us being able to access the internet by asking a question and getting a series of answers, and we can only work on the answers one at a time. Whereas if they did the same thing, they'll be able to understand all of the answers instantaneously. That's one way of understanding it. Okay. Next question from Daniel: will Putin and his war end soon? Will we have some peace for a bit? Yes, it's not going to last very long. I mean, towards the end of this year, we'll be finished. Is my understanding. It can't last. There's even the Russian public are starting to rebel about it. So there's a lot of things that are being misinformation being broadcast, which is trying to confuse the Russian people. But the majority of the Russian people don't want it to continue. So there's going to be all sorts of things happening in the background. Okay, Julia. Yesterday I had a strange experience that when I'm using the same link and listening to the same record in an app, I found that the content changed. Words different, even the voice from a different person. Is it because I'm in a collapsed parallel universe? Maybe you have linked into a different event space that you're part of. Some people can do this. Some people do it completely randomly, and it can cause problems with their understanding of who and what they are and what they're doing. Specifically, if they're told that they haven't done something and they think they have, or feel they have, or know they have, or where they've been told that they've done something and they feel they haven't. So it's just meditate on it and ask yourself to be centered and grounded in this particular event space and reality, and you'll find that things will start to line up again. Okay, AW, the people who ascend but decide to stay in their current bodies, are they all being given a new life plan? If yes, how is the plan different from the life plan before the ascension? I'm assuming that the goals are a bit different if they are already ascending to the 4th frequency. Part of their life plan would include going into the 4th frequency. It would include ascending. So there'll be no change there. The potential to ascend, though, is not always guaranteed, because obviously things can change. So it's a bolt-on part, if you call it that. It's part of, if it's there, if they ascend, it's great, it's there. If they don't, well, we'll work on it the next incarnation you've had. Okay. So Vanny was saying, you were saying that we don't have free will if we are taking back-to-back incarnations. Wrong. We do have free will, but we have a life plan that basically could span a number of incarnations. So the goals associated with that life plan are still there. How we achieve those goals is the free will. So just to look at the rest of it, what if I am becoming aware of the topics we are discussing here and would like to move forwards? Would I have some free will? The answer is yes. Okay, I've been practicing Kriya Yoga a little bit now for more than a year now. I feel some tingling sensations in my spine moving up and down. Does this mean anything? Yes, it means you're raising your frequencies. You're experiencing the Kundalini energy, which is fantastic. Well done. Keep doing it. Keep doing Kriya Yoga. Keep meditating. Keep the spine and the neck straight. When we're lying in bed and it's cold, we want to get out to do our meditation, and we think, oh, we can meditate in bed. It's the ego's trying to basically pull the wool over our eyes. Get some warm clothes on, get out of bed, sit in a straight backed chair or sit cross-legged, and make sure your spine is straight, and do the Kriya Yoga or meditate and breathe in and breathe out. Saying the Hong Saw, Hong as you breathe in, Saw as you breathe out mentally. And keep doing it. Keep doing it. Keep doing it. Keep doing it. What you've experienced is one of the little milestones that we experience, and that's a positive sign. So keep going. Okay. So Daniel, you have a huge body of work available to us. It is amazing how available you are. I'm amazed at the body of work you've produced. Thank you very much. Well, thank you for all. Thank you for all participating. Doesn't matter how big the group is. It can be big. It can be small. It can be 2 people, me and somebody else. That doesn't matter. The fact is that it's there and it helps the energies move on. Okay. AB, last question, I think, because we're running out of time. We get down to 3 minutes. If there are countless souls with high levels of sentience waiting to incarnate on Earth, why are there so many backfill souls taking those spots instead? Wouldn't it make sense to have those souls, as higher souls who are who are wanting to incarnate, especially during times like this? Those that have ascended tend to stay in the high levels. Those of us who have chosen to stay here to help those ascend tend to sort of continue to be of service. So from a logical perspective, I would agree with you. Yes, it does make more sense. But the thing is that people tend to, once they've ascended to a certain level, incarnate at that level. So they may incarnate on Earth in the human form, but in the 4th frequency level, which has got this level of content that we're experiencing now, and another level of content. Now, clearly, we can see both, but we tend to focus on what the frequency that we're in. So they would see the 4th level and the 3rd level, but they wouldn't see the 5th. Those in the 5th level would see the 5th, the 4th, and the 3rd, but not the 6th. But both of those souls that incarnate in those levels would be focusing on what they're experiencing on the 5th frequency level and the content of the 5th frequency level. Okay, well, I hope that helps. There's only about a minute left, so I'm going to thank you very much for sending in your questions. It's always a delight to be able to look at them, and it also helps me as well, because sometimes the questions come from different angles, and sometimes I'm sort of channeling information on the spot rather than just telling you from what I know. So thank you very, very much. It's good. It's good to do, and it's good to have you all participating. So thank you very much. Just to remind you, there isn't a Satsanga in March because I'm out of the country for most of it. So the next one is in April. So I'll send you the link to that on the website and via the emails and via the blogs. So namaste to you all. God's love and source's love to you all. And thank you very much for participating.
Welcome to the meditation of this World Satsanga in February. And this particular meditation is actually to make us more accepting of the changes that are going to happen as we transition from the Piscean age to the Aquarian age. And it's all about being in a state of beingness or acceptance. So let's just close our eyes. If we're sitting on the ground, sit cross-legged, hopefully with your back as straight as possible. If you're in a chair, the chair should be a straight-backed chair with your your back straight and your feet flat on the ground, your hands palm uppermost on your upper thighs, eyes closed but gently focused on the origin of the spiritual or third eye, which is in between the eyebrows and above the bridge of the nose. I want you to just empty your minds. Just focus on this point in between the eyebrows and above the bridge of the nose. Just focus on that and concentrate on focusing on that. You don't need to think anything. You don't need to worry about anything. You don't need to try to do anything. This is being in a state of beingness or acceptance, letting everything happen as it's supposed to happen, when it's supposed to happen. When we feel the intuition we're supposed to interact with that which is happening, then that's when we should do. Being in the Aquarian Age is all about being in acceptance and being of service to those who need help and request help. About community, about communion, about being one, about being equal and even. Feel the energy associated with being coherently one. Feel connected to everything. Feel yourself expand as one. Feel that the walls in your house are one with you. The garden that your house is located in, or the suburb that your house is located, is part of you. Everybody in the suburb is part of you. Everybody in your city is part of you. Everything in the city is part of you. All the continents, the other countries are all part of you, and the peoples within those countries are also part of you. Everything is part of you. The whole world is part of you. If you spread yourself further, the solar system is part of you. The localized stars are part of you. The galaxy is part of you. All the galaxies local to our galaxy is part of you. And the whole universe is part of you. Everything is you, and you are everything. This is the right state of beingness. Being everything. Recognizing that one is everything. That one is connected to everything. That everything and everyone is you, and you are everything and everyone. So when you make a decision, you have to consider the downstream functions to everything and everyone that your actions will create. And you can choose whether that decision is appropriate or not. I'm not talking about whether you wash your face in the morning with soap and water or just water. You might want to find out whether the soap that you have been using is ecologically friendly, for example. Just realize that your decisions have a myriad of downstream effects. So if you can keep your decision processes to be minor in terms of how they affect those individuals downstream of you, because you're considerate as to how it might affect them, then you will surely evolve faster whilst incarnate on this planet. Feel the oneness, feel the connectedness, feel the expansion, feel the oneness, all levels of sentience. Feel how calm you are now that you're part of the oneness of everything. No worries, no concerns, no frustrations, no desires, no greed, no materialism, no selfishness. This is how it's going to feel in the age of Aquarius. We are one with everything and everyone, and of course one with nature. Big nature, not just on the Earth, but all the galaxies within the multiverse, certainly within the universe, the physical universe that we're in now. We'll just stay here in this state of beingness for a few more minutes. You can extend this meditation for as long as you wish. Now you've felt what it's like to be in acceptance of the changes from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius, the movement away from technology or dependence on technology to more dependence upon nature and each other. Being content, being happy, being one world. Although ultimately we're part of something much bigger. Right now in this temporary incarnation that we have, this is where we are. Just be. Isn't it wonderful to just be and not have any pressing engagements, any worries, any frustrations, any desires? Being content is what we're going to experience most of our incarnations that we have in the Aquarian age. If you wanted, you can stay connected in this way. It'll slowly dissipate anyway, but you can just keep it for a bit longer by just simply coming back into the room. You don't need to reduce your expansiveness. It will gradually become less expansive anyway. It'll allow you to feel it a bit longer though. So again, just gradually come back into the room. Slowly open your eyes. Take a drink of water if you have it to help ground you. And hopefully you've experienced some of the state of beingness associated with going into the Aquarian age, and it'll help us to transition and change from structure or form to formlessness and beingness. Well, that's the end of the Satsanga in February, and there isn't one in March because we are away quite a long time, but the next one is in April. So I'll look forward to working with you in April. Namaste to you all, and God's love to you all.